And it's personal, yet this goes into the whole theme of the cabin fever. It just all melded together. Here was somebody's personal and had passed away from COVID. And that to me is just it's incredible. Sheltered in Place, that's the obvious track here. How did you feel about when you were writing that?
Well, that came from a conversation I had actually with the same guy who alerted me to John's death, Richard Bresnahan, my best friend from college. Um, he's still at the college. In fact, he's the artist in residence up there. When I, as a 20-year-old, stuck up my thumb and headed down to Appalachia to learn how to play the banjo, he headed east to study traditional Japanese pottery. And so he and I have maintained a close relationship for 45 years now. And he happened to mention to me that the local Dorothy Day House had closed its doors, which serviced the homeless community. And it just made me think, wow, now these are people who have been sheltered in place for years. Uh, they are invisible to us. We all know them. They're at our stop signs or traffic lights. Um, and what are they going through right now? So taking a commonly used term like sheltered in place in much the same way you had um, frontline, and sort of turning it 90 degrees and seeing what it looked like, and also using it as a vehicle to hopefully, what you try to do with any kind of art is open up people's hearts. And commonly what I hear about this song was, boy, I never even thought about that. And so, I mean, giving people a new idea, that's a pretty great accomplishment.
That's amazing. And the amount of time you spent in Appalachia, it's just, that's a hard area of this country. Just the things that they go through and still are to this day. And now they're
And
dealing
it's
with so
and
many.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's still what I think about. It's why I felt so at home doing this project in the North Georgia mountains, because finally I was back in the mountains.
Yeah, yeah.
Living down, I'm in the shadow of Stone Mountain down here, but it's definitely not the same as being up in Blue Ridge, Cherry Log, Ellijay, Jasper, that whole area where you're actually perched up there, and it just feels like home.
Are you that disconnected up there? Is it the cabin is just so far out into the woods that's you basically unplug?
Oh, I definitely unplug. Um, but I've got internet there, and we have electricity, and um, and there, excuse me, there are other cabins around, but at that particular time, there was no one around because so many of those cabins up there, people rent them out, or they don't. There's only a handful of people who live there full time, and I was essentially living there full time.
Yeah.
And had I not had a family at home, had I not been traveling from across the world, I wouldn't have been there. So it was a particularly isolated time.
So you had a whole batch of songs, like 30 songs before
Yeah,
you
about
went into quarantine?
yeah, I probably wrote about 25 or 30 songs, and um, when you don't have any disturbances, you write a song and say, "Oh, well, cool. Let's strike while the proverbial iron is hot, and let's start another one." And there's some that are languishing because I got to a point where I just didn't know what I was going to do with it anymore. And luckily, I have a little studio set up there so that I could quickly run and remember the melody because I only
Yeah.
write down the words. So it was a lot of being out on the porch and dashing down to the studio below and doing a quick demo, and then coming home finally after 3 weeks back to Smoke Rise and going into my little home studio and doing a crash course and learning all the songs, recording them, and then sending them up to my engineer up in the DC area who magically makes me sound good.
It takes now we have all these nice tools on our little laptops and everything. It's just so much easier in certain ways, but you still have to have that talent as an engineer.
Oh gosh, you have to have ears, and you have to know what technology to call on to serve you Uh, and this guy, Bob Dawson is his name. He has studios up there called Bias Studios, and he's been my engineer forever. He just knows what my voice sounds like. He knows what makes me sound good. And he also, we know one another so well that I completely trusted him in taking 2 or 3 vocal passes and constructing one acceptable one out of it. And he was dead on 99.9% of the time.
That's fantastic. How does the whole process start for you? And we probably talked about this before, and I know this probably gets asked a lot. Lyrics first, then melody. Melody comes first, then right to the melody.
Yes, all of the above.
Just either way, you could switch it
It
up.
just depends. In this case, it was mostly the lyrics that came first, but you have to have some kind of a rhythmic tempo to the way that the words are written and the way they fall off your tongue so that you know that you can't put the accent on the wrong syllable for a
Yeah.
particular meter. And a melody seems to kind of organically develop out of that. I've tended to go for simpler melodies. Thinking back to John Prine, I remember I was in some kind of a writer's workshop with him at some festival, and I happened to say, well, look how much use John Prine, for instance, gets out of 3 melodies. And he turned to me and says, I have that many? So generally the lyrics come first, but sometimes the music comes first. And in each case, whatever begins kind of speaks to the other, and it tends to fall into place pretty quickly.
Nice. There's one track that kind of stuck out called "Dog Talking Blues." What is the origin behind that?
Well, there is a form called the talking blues, and I just happen to have a guitar here with me. Let me make sure it's all plugged in here. There's an old form called the talking blues. I first heard it from listening to Woody Guthrie records that went. If you want to get to heaven, let me tell you what to do. Got to grease your feet in a little mutton stew. Slide out of the devil's hand, then you ooze over in the promised land. Going greasy. So it's kind of archetypal white rap music, I guess. And it was used a lot by different people. Bob Dylan used it. Pete Seeger used it. Woody Guthrie used it a lot. And I've used it a lot over the years, whether it be stringing together Yogi Berra's malapropisms or even, well, on this one, in this case, it was my dog talking blues. Pets are loving this pandemic. I mean,
Oh, I know.
my dog don't know no quarantine. She's just happy I'm around. She'll fall asleep right at my feet, never make a sound. Content that I can sit for hours, reading in my chair. Sometimes she'll open just one eye to make certain I'm still there. Or maybe eating something. Getting clumsy enough, maybe to drop it right. So it's just kind of, it was a fun break from, number one, writing melodies. It's a form I've used a lot. And it just felt like it'd be kind of fun to have something like that on the album. This was one I actually intentionally sat down to write. Unlike the other kind of spoken word thing, The Bean.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to a number of different people who were, and my wife has this thing on her Facebook page that she puts out every night called the Virtual Diner. What are you eating tonight? And inevitably, First of all, people were eating better than they'd ever eaten normally in their suppers. You know, you're seeing all this at our house too. We're really working on the COVID-19, if you know what I mean. Um, uh, but lots of people seem to be discovering beans for the very first time as a staple in their meals. And now, being married to a Cuban,
Yeah, easy protein.
you know, they're pretty standard fare, and it starts off. You know, I'll never forget the first time, though you may think me crazy. It was in a mountain kitchen, the Kentucky town of Daisy. 'Twas there at Roscoe Holcomb's house. At supper time was spread that Appalachian staple, that is soup beans and cornbread. Now the bean in question, pinto, and the cornbread never sweet. Add onions and some chow chow. It's the finest thing you'll eat. And it goes on, of course. It's a peon to beans. And it was just one of those things that, oh, look at everybody's discovering beans. Well, beans have been a part of my life forever. So I thought, there's nothing that's not worth writing about.
So have you been cooking a lot more? Is your wife Carmen, who is
Yeah.
also an artist, I believe,
Yeah,
and
she's a wonderful children's book author, Carmen Agrediti, well known and loved throughout Georgia. Yeah, we've been cooking these amazing meals, and tonight I'm making a recipe I found in the New York Times for ginger chicken thighs.